The history of Sweden from 1772 to 1809 is better known as the Gustavian era of Kings Gustav III and Gustav IV, as well as the reign of King Charles XIII of Sweden. Finland was lost to Russia in a war that lasted from February 1808 to September 1809. As a result of the peace agreement, Finland became a Grand Duchy and thus was officially ruled by the Tsar of Russia, though it was not strictly part of Russia. Humanitarian aid from England did not succeed in preventing Sweden from adopting more Napoleon-friendly policies after the Swedish coup d'état in 1809. In 1810, French Marshal Jean-Baptiste Bernadotte, one of Napoleon's top generals, was elected as Charles XIV, John of Sweden, reigning from 1818 to 1844. He had a Jacobin background and was well grounded in revolutionary principles, but put Sweden in the coalition that opposed Napoleon. In 1813, his forces joined the Allies against Napoleon and defeated the Danes at Bornhoved. In the Treaty of Kiel, Denmark ceded mainland Norway to the Swedish king. Norway, however, declared its independence, adopted a constitution, and chose a new king. Sweden invaded Norway to enforce the terms of the Kiel Treaty in the last war Sweden has fought. After brief fighting, the peace established a personal union between the two states. Even though they shared the same king, Norway was largely independent of Sweden, except Sweden controlled foreign affairs. Sweden, much like Japan at the same time, transformed from a stagnant rural society to a vibrant industrial society between the 1860s and 1910. The agricultural economy shifted gradually from a communal village to a more efficient private farm-based agriculture. There was less need for manual labor on the farm, so many went to the cities, and 1 million Swedes emigrated to the United States between 1850 and 1890. Many returned and brought word of the higher productivity of American industry, this stimulating faster modernization. The steady decline of death rates in Sweden began around 1810. For men and women of working age, the death rate trend diverged, however, leading to increased excess male mortality during the first half of the century. There were very high rates of infant and child mortality before 1800. Among infants and children between the ages of 1 and 4, smallpox peaked as a cause of death in the 1770 to 1780s and declined afterward. Mortality also peaked during this period due to other air, food, and waterborne diseases, but these declined as well during the early 19th century. The decline of several diseases during this time created a more favorable environment that increased children's resistance to disease and dramatically lowered child mortality. With a broader voting franchise, the nation saw the emergence of 3 major party groups: Social Democrat, Liberal, and Conservative. The parties debated further expansion of the voting franchise. The Liberal Party, based on the middle class, put forth in 1907 a program for local voting rights later accepted in the Riksdag. The majority of liberals wanted to require some property ownership before a man could vote, while the Social Democrats called for total male suffrage without property limitations. The strong farmer representation in the second chamber of the Riksdag maintained a conservative view, but their decline after 1900 gradually ended opposition to full suffrage. Sweden was neutral in World War I, although the Swedish government was sympathetic to both sides at different times during the conflict, even briefly occupying the Åland Islands jointly with the Germans. At first, the Swedish government flirted with the possibility of changing their neutral stance to side with the Central Powers, and made concessions to them, including mining the Öresund Straits to close them to Allied warships wishing to enter the Baltic. Later, the Swedish signed agreements allowing trade with the Allied powers and limiting trade with Central Powers, though this brought about the fall of the government of Hjalmar Hammarskjöld. During the First World War and the 1920s, its industries expanded to meet the European demand for Swedish steel, ball bearings, wood pulp, and matches. Post-war prosperity provided the foundations for the social welfare policies characteristic of modern Sweden. Sweden created a successful model of social democracy because of the unique way in which Sweden's labor leaders, politicians, and classes cooperated during the early development of Swedish democracy. Sweden's socialist leaders chose a moderate, reformist political course with broad-based public support. This helped Sweden avoid the severe extremist challenges and political and class divisions that plagued many European countries that attempted to develop social democratic systems after 1911. By dealing early, cooperatively, and effectively with the challenges of industrialization and its impact on Swedish social, political, and economic structures, Swedish Social Democrats were able to create one of the most successful social democratic systems in the world, including both a welfare state and extensive protections of civil liberties. In the 1930s, foreign policy concerns in Sweden were primarily centered around Soviet and German expansionism. This led to pursuing abortive efforts at Nordic defense cooperation. During World War II, Sweden followed a policy of armed neutrality, although thousands of Swedish volunteers fought in the Winter War with Finland against the Soviets. Sweden did permit German troops to pass through its territory to and from occupation duties in Norway, and supplied the Nazi regime with steel and ball bearings. The dominant historiography for decades after the war ignored the Holocaust and used what it called the small state realist argument. It held that neutrality and cooperation with Germany were necessary for survival since Germany was vastly more powerful. Concessions were limited and were only made when the threat was too great. Neutrality was bent but not broken. National unity was paramount. And in any case, Sweden had the neutral right to trade with Germany. Sweden was one of the first non-participants of World War II to join the United Nations in 1946. Apart from this, the country tried to stay out of alliances and remained officially neutral during the entire Cold War, never joining NATO. The Social Democratic Party held government for 44 years from 1932 to 1976. They spent much of the 1950s and 1960s building Folkhemmet, the people's home, the Swedish welfare state. Sweden's industry had not been damaged by the war, and it was in a position to help rebuild Northern Europe in the decades following 1945. This led to an economic upswing in the post-war era that made the welfare system feasible.